me tell you what I do with selection tables. I've seen people start them with SEL. I don't like that. And I'll tell you why. I like, say if I'm writing an output process called monthly, I make my scan table called monthly with a V on the end. I know it goes with monthly then, and when they look at them alphabetically, they're right next to each other. I make an auto, if it needs a special automatic table, monthly Y. And then again, they're right together when I look at all the processing, and I don't have to go figure out which one of the SEL date range, SEL this or that or the other thing I need for this.
And one advantage to doing that is if you use the same selection set for multiple reports.
Yeah, you can use them again and again, but that's how usually they're enough different that mine work like that. You can say, if you use a lot of date range ones, you could say a select date range, and you know that you could pick that up here and there, or just pick it out.
In other words, also protects your selection if it's anticipated, and it protects it from user changing it or wiping it out. Because the SELs are updatable through filePro.
But you can password protect them now.
You can. Well, somebody had it on Unix years ago. One of the suggestions was make your selections read-only. You can do that in a Unix system. You couldn't do it in Windows, but you could do it in Unix, and that was how they protected theirs. But you're right. That was always a problem. And the keystrokes for it was filePro's selecting keystrokes were S, and then on selection tables, S meant save. So it was real easy to get confused and hit save, S, when you wanted to select instead of save. So I've written over many of them in my day. Okay, so here I want to show you one other folder. Another thing filePro allows you to do is you can call to process tables that aren't in the file you're sitting in. You can make a library. You can make a folder in filePro. I have one called X process, and it's all my default processes, little snippets of programming that I have saved to make use of things. Okay, so for instance, I've got bottom browse. So this one, I'm doing a browse. I got what line goes in the bottom. Now this one isn't a call. I don't call to this, but I go and read it, pull it into my process table when I want to add one, and I don't have to type all this crap in. So I made myself a little library of code snippets to do different things. I can just as easily call to these. Now here's this environment. Let's see what this one does. This sets up variables, long variables with all the filePro locations, so I don't have to again type this in. I want to know where the menus are. I want to set up a variable to find menus or fields or whatever. I can pick and choose. I have all this stuff all set up in one thing that I can pull it in anytime I need it in a process table.
Just so that I follow, when you say pull it in.
Okay, when you go to, okay, so let me go into one of these.
I mean,
If I go to F6.
Copying and pasting the code, or are you actually talking about?
No, I
you
just
say you're
load
not
it.
calling it.
Okay, I just loaded. Okay, so it is F8, load. I put in the name of the file, a slash, and the name of the process table. At the load, this says line number, do line number first, and then when it says name of file, you put the file it's in, a slash, and the name of the table. You don't put the PRC part. And then it will embed it wherever, starting at whatever line you told it to put it on. It'll load it in. So you can...
Forgive me, I'm always working in VI, so I never think of that function, but yes, I forgot about that.
You forgot about that, right. So there you go. So you can load it in and embed, so you can make a little library of things you use often, and then just pick them up. You can also, when you're doing processing, you can call a routine that's in another file if you want to run it from another file. I don't know if I have an example here and load all this different stuff I do in here. I have a copyright that I can easily load in and drop on a file, a process table to put my copyright in it. I have select print, I have select dates. Now these ones I'll usually load into a a table that I end with a V, but it gives me on here from date to date. I just have to add in what fields it's matching to. So in the pick part, I just have to put which the right field number is for the file I'm loading this to. But it has all the logic. It uses PFC mark to give me my end date using whatever their C mark is. It'll do the most future date that it can do and stay within the 100 years.
And if you're going to call from another library, you have to make sure you only use dummy variables.
Right. Or the function that it's doing isn't something that's messing with data. It could be, the contents here, one of these is from Laura Brody from years ago. She had a calendar function that would make a little calendar on the screen. You could call to that without having it, because it would be something to show you and not something to do anything. I'll show you how that one works. So I have a number of my little tricks in this file too. If I go into inquire add on X process. Now I'll give you another hint here, X process. When I'm in filePro and I want things that don't really belong with this data structure when I'm building a job, I often copy this X process database into whatever project I'm working on. I pull things out of it, and it has tools in here for some things I do often with setups. Or if I find that there's a file that somebody is not using anymore, or I think they're not using it, I'll rename it with triple X's in front of its name. If nobody complains after some period of time, I know it is not really in use. I do the same thing with a process table. If you're not sure, I have a customer and we just upgraded a process to email some things out that we used to print. And we thought everybody was not using the print version, and we found out they were. And we had to go and adjust. They had some old menus we didn't know were still floating around. So again, rename some things, get them out of there, and then when they scream, we say, well, you should be using this menu. Why are you doing that? So, and that way, if you do find that you need to put it back, it's still there. You just have to rename it back without the X's.
Unless it says year-end. I've done that, where it was a year-end process where they posted year-to-date stuff.
Oh,
Yeah, they only use it once a year.
It's crazy. So sometimes I find that for my own sanity, don't delete it, because you might find it's something months down the road they really need. But there you go. So let me pull this up on the screen, and I'll show you what kind of stuff I've collected in here. I have built for myself, I know somebody in the last couple days had a menu rebuilding option. I have a real objection to the -RA menu rebuilding. And I will tell you why. It's because they can rebuild the indexes, but they're going to rebuild them the way they are now, not the way I designed them. If somebody changed an index, they went in and it's going to just make it the same index. What I want is a record of the way I want the indexes. So if they do a rebuild of all their indexes, they're going to go back to the right way, not anything that they got changed along the way. So I wrote a script. filePro has all the tools, and I can share a couple of these if anybody wants them. Send me an email. The menu scripts. So if I hit I, it will create a script on a menu, and I can type the names of the files I wanted to index, and it will put all the parameters for that menu. filePro has all the tools to do this in programming, so it's on the fly stuff. So if a customer calls me and they want to, I always add rebuild indexes, and then all indexes rebuild the indexes in your invoicing, rebuild the, I separate them out into different parts so that if it's a big project, they don't have to do everything sometimes. They just need a certain section of the project done. Okay, that little calendar routine, this is the little routine. This was something that Laura did and shared with us years ago. But it's a little menu calendar you could pop up on the screen if you needed something with a menu, with a calendar. So that's a call. I mean, that's running that little calendar thing you saw there. I have a script here to make a script to unlock all the files with filePro's unlock command. Instead of using, I've seen people do delete, use the operating system commands to clear out the lock files. But the filePro was designed, you use the filePro one if you can. I like that better. But you have, the menu. So let me show you what the menu thing does. So this is just a collection of things that I find helpful, and I always put them in every project so I can do them real quick. And
what's the syntax for calling, processing in another table? Is this call table name / processing file name without the extension?
Yeah, the library. Well, the library, I think you need the full path. So I usually make a library environment or variable and long variable, and it will have, pfdir, pfdata, pfdir, filepro.
Okay,
The
so
file
call
name.
and then the full path.
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't put the PRC on.
You can just use the file you want to go to / the processing table. You don't need the full.
You don't have the whole path. There you go.
It knows the environment. The environment knows where you're at.
Right. Okay, so let's look at one of the results of these. I have an index that has, let's see, define user menu index. So this is the kind of all files. This is a rebuild of all the options. It's F5. So this is what it would write. It does an unlock on a file before it builds its index, and then it writes. It read all this from filePro. filePro did this. It knows all of this stuff. So it went through my whole folder, picked up every file I have there, looked to see if it had an index, and figured out what the index parameters were. These are all filePro system arrays that you can use and build and read and figure out things and check. You have capability of all this.
Is that on your website, that script?
No, but I can make it available if somebody needs it.
It's also in since
FBA.
5.7, we've had the rebuild very similar to this in the utilities off the.
Does it? I thought that did minus RA, and I've always had trouble with the RA, which rebuilds all the indexes in a given file.
No, that one does not.
That one builds
That
it
one
with
builds these
does the
scripts.
scripting. That's
And then you
fabulous.
go into
I
a
didn't
file
know that
and
was
you can
there.
actually select one if you want to just do one file.
Yeah, but this, so that the idea is you should have a record. So when I built this for a customer, and it's 2 years later, and they have a problem, I know how I can see what I wanted it to do. And if they've made a change that messed something up, you get some customers that have development systems and think they know what they're doing and go in and mess with things. So having a way to put it back the way you designed it this is kind of like a security blanket to make sure it goes back right. But anyway, so that's a tool there. I didn't want to go into the details of how to program that, but that's the some of the stuff you can make filePro do. I have processing in filePro that actually writes processing tables, so that you can take programming and write a process table from it, and then so it can be flexible. I don't have to know what all the rules are, but data controls how the table gets built. So that can be fun.
Yeah.
All right, so we want to look at this now. I know you spent a lot of time yesterday on browse, so we're going to flip through this fast. But here's what I did to kind of give some information on the things you can do with browse and how you can make your browse look better and different and do different things with it. So I made all these prompts are like, I have @ keys. And they'll bring this little zip code file up all different ways so you can see what I've got. So this is our default browse. We did a browse, it popped up on the screen. It's names, it's zip code, city, state, zip kind of thing. Okay, so that's a general browse everybody knows how to do. But I can do a browse where it's matching just any 152 zip code. So I've given it a key that's just 152, and so it's showing me only matches to 152 zip codes. 3-character match. Okay? So that can, so you can do this with last names, any kind of index logic you can do this with. Okay? Okay. So I can partial match by state. Let's try that one. So I've got PA. I'm matching on the state code only, so I'm getting all the Pennsylvanias. So shorten my list as to what I can look at. Now I can play number 4, let's see. So this one asks me where I'm putting it. So let me try, I can vary these parameters. So maybe I make it 15 characters and I start row and column. So I'm going to start 3. Let's see what. And then you can change where it sorts, the show keep. So now that moved it over on my screen. So you've got parameters when you set up a browse as to where it's going to be on the screen, how big it's going to be, all that stuff. Okay, so you knew all this. I'm just refreshing. Now what if we play with color? Look at this one. Okay. On the side of my screen, I have Pennsylvania \FB and New York \FE. So this was my color codes that I'm going to do. So let me roll up and down. You can see when I hit a different state. So I put Pittsburgh, I made it in New York, so now the zip code puts it in the right spot, but if you notice I changed color when I hit it because I'm using the New York color because that was coded to that state code. So I can actually make my, let's say you're putting up invoice line items, you can make the payments a different color than the charges. Makes it easier to find things and read it. So there's Delaware. Different color. It's just changing the parameters on the browse line depending on the state code. A way to make it look better. If you're, make things pop out that you're trying to show, what easy to do. Fuzzy browse. You all know fuzzy browse. We can fuzzy this. City to find. A city with Berg in the name. You don't have to have it at the beginning of the line, but notice it's also trying to match things with a few of the letters. Here's Bloomberg, but it has Berg, some of the letters better, and it'll go down like that. Okay, so what do we got? Toggle. All right, toggle's the next thing. This is one 7. This is one I use a lot. I'll have a browse up, and I'll say, okay, I can't show them enough information, but I'll let them toggle so they can hit a letter at the bottom and it will do a different kind of a display. It'll either add columns or change columns or move things so they can get more data from the same thing. Maybe I'll look in a different index. So it's just a matter of, it says toggle from all zips by state. If I hit the other one, I get toggle to state only. So just a way to make your browsing more friendly to your end user and to get more out of the screen. So they don't have to go out of the browse and then you have to hit a different thing to get a different browse. You can do it all in one thing. So running totals. Okay, so I put a count down here. This one I always have fun with. So this one is dummy variable, where I did math as I was browsing and I got numbers and I can go down and it's counting. So you can actually do little things and make stuff happen. You can put a calculation there. You can make stuff show that isn't real in the data.
Can you show your code that you're using, or some of the code, or
Sure.
the color part? Interesting to me.
You like the color part?
Yeah.
All right, so let me minimize this. Okay, so we're gonna go get which one it was. Find the color here. I think I'm in the right table. Okay, match 3, match color. Okay, so this just put the colors over on the side. So then that we go down here and we've got PRC color. All right, so when you have a browse line and you put a PRC in it, it's going to go and run that little color routine. So here we go. There's the color putting it in. So
Okay.
I said if the zip code field 3 is PA, then CA is, put that in, and if you notice the command line, let's see, we go to the bottom. So CA is going to be a variable on that browse line. Let me go to the
Okay,
browse.
that's what I need to know is how,
That was-
where you're putting color value, you've got it in a dummy variable on the
Yeah,
browser. Okay,
no,
great.
dummy variable on the line. And it does take up space when you put those in, unless they've changed something recently. It always took up space and you would lose space at the end of the line. But here, here's the browse line. It starts with that dollar sign or that percent
Got it, very good.
asterisk CA.
Nice trick.
Put the color in.
Can you go back to the running balance screen, go to the second screen, and then scroll back up to the first? Please,
Okay, so let me.
That can get tricky.
Okay, so we're trying to do the calculation part.
Yeah.
The one that did the math thing. Okay, so let's see which one that was. I think I have these pretty well labeled in here. Well, I guess not.
I was gonna say that gets tricky, because as you're going down, it's good, but if you go page up again, it does do processing on the items that are on the screen, but when you start hitting new processing, it can continue adding.
It can do that because you're passing by those fields.
Right.
Yeah, some of the moving up and down, so it can be a little tricky on those calculations. Let me see. I did move up and down, and it did not. It just displayed the numbers it had.
No, because now you were already on a screen, so on that screen, as you move up and down, you're not running processing anymore, because it's already, like, it's static.
Well, it's not, because every time you scroll up and down, it goes to the processing table that you put in there.
Well,
So
that's
you
why I
gotta
wanted to
put
see it
some
on the
logic
screen.
in that,
Yeah.
say, don't
Let me see
recalculate.
which act.
You go buy it again.
That was 8. Okay.
Can we see it on the actual running screen?
Match code, let's see what we got here. So I set a count to 0, and then we just added 1 to it. I believe it added with a browse add +1. So that should have gone up and down. Let's see. 8. Okay, so if I go all the way to the bottom, I'm down in the next section, and I go back up.
So you get 12, 13, but it continues adding. That's where you gotta be careful.
You gotta make sure the field has a value in it.
If the calculation is line related, if I was doing math on that line, a percentage of
Yeah.
units times price, it
Yeah,
would be
that wouldn't be an
perfect.
issue.
If I'm trying to do running
running
totals,
balance,
what I would really
Different.
do is I would match, I would kind of try to do it outside of this somehow.
Yeah. That's the tricky part.
Okay, so we got running, we got the call. Let's see what that one does. I forget this one. So it's putting me in a thing, enter to select. So you're selecting, and then you're going to do something with the patient or with that person's name, or however you're playing with this. So you can pick and choose and add and delete, and you've got all that stuff with browsers. You know how to do that. I don't have to go through that stuff. But the one thing I do want to show you, and I know Richard did this yesterday pretty nicely, so let me show you this one. When you're doing, this is a little invoicing kind of thing, and you're doing, I say I want to update. So I'm on that line item and I want to make a change. So I hit U to update, and I get a little screen pop up update. I have a pretty little thing with headings, and I can change some of these pieces of data. Let's make this 20. And I can save it, and it fixes the browse, and it fixes the total at the top of the screen up here. But what else Richard showed us, and I was wanting to make sure you saw how to do this, is this kind of a
Nancy,
browse correction.
we carry that one step further. We actually have the box show up where Sandy's is right now. So it looks identical, changes the color, you can update it in there. There's actually a
That's
box
what
on
I'm
the
doing.
box.
That's what I'm doing.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay, so the other way to do that kind of a thing is to just do it right on the line in the browse. And we saw that yesterday, and I know now you know, so I don't have to go over it very much. But you just have to make a browse screen or a pop-up screen that fits right where you're trying to put it. And that's all you need. You just put it there, you use @BR to know where to put it. And there you go. So now you can update right on the screen, same thing. Make this change here to another value, it recalculates, you save, you're back on the browse, the calculations all happen just the same. So that tool saves you real estate because you can do it in the browse. It looks better to the customer. This is something a little friendlier. So I didn't want to spend a lot on that because you guys saw it in other presentations, but there we go. Okay, so another thing I wanted to go over, am I jumping around too fast? Is a couple things that might, if you didn't know these things were here. Okay, so I have, I did to show people, or for myself, to see how these things all work, because the manual tells you this is it. If you don't know how that looks, it's nice to see. So if I push F, for instance, this will show me all the file profiles that I have open in an array.
Where are you?
Okay.
You sitting on a record?
I'm sitting on a record. I had that other screen open when it had states and MOS zip was going when we were playing with that. So this is, you have arrays in filePro that you can use to find out, this is all files. This is what it sees is open. Have you seen these system arrays?
Mm-hmm.
No. Okay. Let me kind of show you a few of them, and you'll see. I can see, it'll show me the command file, what was last executed, all in parameters. Now you just read through them. It's an array. So element, I believe these all start with 1. I don't think they use 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You just read through the array elements, and you get all the information.
Where in the code can you show it?
Yeah. We'll go to the code. I do these for myself sometimes because I find the manuals are not always giving me, or I don't understand them clearly or whatever, so I just make a little thing to show me, and I say, oh yeah, that's what's going to show me. So now I know how to use it if I think I'm going to need something like that. Okay, so we were just doing which one were we trying to do? Command line? Okay, I'm going to hit out of this. So that's K. Oh, there's K. Okay. So there's an environment or an array at command at CMD LIN. Okay. And it has an element, you can increment it, let's just go up. The do all, let's see, I did this in a routine where it picked it up, so let's go to do all. I know there's new keystrokes to find these things, but I don't have them under my belt yet, so we're doing it the old way. Oh, do all, come on, do all. And I should have put an thing in the front. Okay. So if it was a K, all right, so it's doing command line equals, and then it's doing the command line count, and it's just going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until I stop asking for more. So that's it. It's just in an array that's part of filePro that knows this stuff. The other ones are the same thing. You're just going through all files. I can show you what license knows in there, so you can check a license. Directory list, I use directory list a lot. The dir list, that's my most common one that I would use out of this stack. So you have a way, and there's a whole list of these in your manual. I think I used most of them here. One of the things you have to do for the directory listings is you have to open the directory. So you have to use open dir to tell it what directory you want it to read for you. So if I do it.
One of the handy things about the system files or system arrays is that you can get information about a particular record. I have a routine that goes through and I grab the dates, and if a record is 60 days or older, it deletes it. It happens to be an output file, PDF type thing, but my client doesn't want to keep them, and anything that's 60 days or older, it just deletes. And I get that from the system array on the file.
Yeah, I do a lot of document management with filePro and moving documents around and storing them and writing them. So here in this directory, okay, this is the filePro directory I'm in. It gives you the name of the file in one variable. It gives me the extension in another variable. It gives me the full name with both the file name and the extension. So depending on what you're trying to do, you can look for things in the file. You can rename things, you can move things, you can read what's in the directory, go look for things. So this is handy for a lot of things if you need to look in folders or manage documents or other spreadsheets, whatever you want to do. So, and it'll go, you read through the count until you don't find anything, and then you're done. So it's really kind of like that. So let's look.
That's a file that would be pretty generic.
Pardon me?
That would be a pretty generic processing table that you could share with us where we could apply to pretty much anything.
Yeah, well, the one that was there, okay, so all I did, this is it. All I was doing here is opening it for the directory. You use, I could share it for sure. So you can use opendir to tell it what folder. So are you familiar with opendir?
Sure.
Okay. So you tell it what folder, and if there's a mask or something, you want to pick certain files out of the folder. But then you open the folder you want, and then all the dir list stuff will work. So, and then you close it when you're done, so you can go to something else. But these are just counting through them. So if I share this and you play with it, you can see which ones you might like. Let me show you this is one that's relatively new. So here's a license, and they were nice enough to give me a demo because I don't usually use this on my laptop. So there we go. So this tells all about the license that I have on my computer. So if you needed to get information from the license for some reason, you would have access to this stuff right here. So is there one? Oh, here, NU name. This is a variable they have that gives you what operating system you're on if you need to know that. It's got a couple parameters here. let's see, did we look at all of them?
The operating system of your server or the
Yeah.
client? Okay.
Yeah, these come out, all these variables will come out of the information that's in the server or on the whatever's running behind here. So if you were in an application where you were server-side running, you would get it off the server. If you were on a client and running a client version you would get the client, because that would be where it would be looking. I can't imagine it could do it any other way. Did we look at all these so you can kind of get a feel for what's there? I think we did. Okay. This is one of those pages in the manual that I always skipped over because it looked too complex. But it's handy. You will find uses. The directory stuff is my most useful stuff for programming I've done. But you may find uses for these other ones. Okay, so that's the I/O files. All right, so that's those system things. This is a little, I'm not going to answer these. I put these little questions in front just to be annoying. Okay. This was also, one of the things I want to talk about is log files. I talked to a number of people in the last few days and I said, do you know about log files? And they go, what's that? This is one powerful tool in filePro. Let me tell you why. It's a protect your butt kind of tool because you can use it to keep track of what the users on the system are doing. So when they call and say, well, why is this wrong? You can say, well, it's because Mary did this when she wasn't supposed to. Or you can keep track that things are happening, or you can use it for debugging, which is a big thing I do with it. Big thing. I run a lot of web services, and no people are in front of a keyboard. So if there's a problem, nobody can tell me what went wrong or what happened. But the log that it writes when it's running would show me it got up to here and then it kind of got in a loop. Or it got up to here and it stopped and it wasn't supposed to. Or, I can see what the log entries are and the sequence everything happened in. So you can make use of these. Now, how hard is it to do a log file? You have to set 3 things. You need, well, 2 things you set and 1 thing you do. You set the name of the log. You set whether it's going to append or not. That's all you have to tell it, filePro. Do that in at-once processing. You can make a different log for every user by using their username in the log name. You can make a log for the users by date, which is what I do for some of my big projects. And then if we have to say, well, how come this didn't work? And we're trying to find why a certain order was handled incorrectly, we can actually go to that user's log, find it, and see what happened to it, and see all the steps that went through, and what happened, and why it happened. And so we can make and I can tell what process ran it, which is another big thing for us, because we have a very complex system, and sometimes one place doing something is different than another place doing something. So, the log file. So you set those 2 parameters, the name of the file. You can get you use variables to know the path, and you can put logs in any place you want to put them. Make a folder for it, make it a subfolder in the filePro database if they're related to something. However you want to handle that, that's up to you. And if you make them dated and you're going to keep adding new ones, put in a process to clean up the old crap after some period of time when you don't think you'll need them anymore, because they will build up. So the thing that you do to make a log entry then is there's a command, you put log text, and you put what you want it to write. And that's it. Push enter, you're done. Put that in your programming somewhere, it'll write whatever you tell it. I like to add @td and @tm, so I know when it did it and the date. And if you add the user's name to that, which you can get in Windows, I can get it anyway. I assume most of us have. If you have systems where it's important for multiple users, you can get the username from the operating system usually. I know if you can't, you can set something in their batch file to identify them. You can figure out Unix systems, it's always easy. You can get their @ID. So you put that, you say what, so when process table starts, I'll put in the log for that user, I'll put the process I'm running, the name of it. So if I have variations in, maybe they've got new versions, I'll put the right name there. So it'll say that, it'll say what they're doing, it'll go through and put entries in the log at points through the processing. So this is an audit trail. It's kind of a programming audit trail I can look at later when they tell me 2 days later that something didn't go right back then and there's no way for me to recover. The user says, well, it wasn't right. And you say, well, what did you do? I don't know. You know how that is, right? So log files are easy to put in. You can make a variable. I often have a variable setting where I can vary it, and I can say, well, if it's log level, I set a variable called log level. And I can make log entries be more abundant or less abundant by the number I assign to that log level. So I can, in effect, once I'm testing, I can dump a lot of the log entries I might have built into the programming by just changing the number. So maybe 1 means, in my system, 1 means don't put very much logging out, and 10 might mean put every frickin' log entry out there so I can debug real specifically. And that way it can make it go faster. Obviously a log entry is going to take a little bit of time. So if you don't need them, you don't necessarily have to do them. But when you're testing, they can really come in handy.
Nancy, I have one client where we're using that, where I grab with a change of field value. I grab the incoming, the original value, and if it's changed, and we log the change. We made it so that he has a record of.
That's an
what
interesting.
date it
That's interesting use of that. So I can give you. We can talk about in a minute another way. Let's finish log file, and I'll show you another way. Explain another way you can do that same thing to keep track of your audit trail for records. So if I do L here, I think I'm focusing. L. I thought I had this popping up the log. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to show you debugging. You can turn on debugging if you're in a clerk process, D clerk, not R clerk. It's just bang or exclamation B. When you're at the prompts, it'll turn it on. You can look and see what's going on. So I'm going to call to this log file. It's going to append. I gave the name of the log file, a DOS name, a Unix name. Function's called. It's going to log whatever. Completed something. Put your details here. Put who did it. That's it. That's it.
Just a text file you're writing it to?
Yeah, it's just writing an entry in a text file. We'll go look at it here in a sec. I thought I had it on the screen to come pop it up. Okay, so that's it. That's all. That's so easy. I don't know why more people don't use it. So let me see if we can pull that up. You can see it if I can find where that is. I think I put it in this merge. No, the other merge. So this is what I told it to put, the date, the time, what's happening. And it just, I put a little line in to break it apart because I'm appending, so 1 day is from the next. And you can go look at these, later on. You don't have to, these are part of your audit trail, your information for you to use as you go down the stack to deal with your installation.
Can you see the processing for that one more time?
Pardon me?
The processing for that?
Sure. I'll just do it this way. Okay. So we put the environment variable, set it to on. I'll pull it up so you can get a better screenshot. How's that? So you get it all at once instead of in little bits. Oh, yeah, okay. There you go. So just set the variable for the location. And then it just does your, whatever you're gonna log. And I made this generic, so you would just change, put your details here, you put whatever you wanted it to say, of course. And it usually, try to, you wanna, I found that you wanna, if you have like open-ended fields you're putting there, put a concatenation at the end and chop them off at a point. So if you make a comment that's 200 characters long and you don't use it all, just put a brace, quote at the end and push off all the extra spaces, because it will wrap it in there. You'll have a bunch of white space in the log file. So that's it. I mean, it's just log text and whatever you tell it to write. So it's easy to put in your programming, and it's real handy. So that's a command I find a lot of people don't know is in there, and you could make use of. So this is one of the I/O files that can give you a little bit of information.
And what version that started?
Oh, it had to be 4.5 or 8 or something.
Is log text the command, or is that?
Log text is
that
the
dummy
command.
that you created?
Log text is the command, and whatever you put after it. So this one put in the log file completed and with whatever A was assigned to. And then it put down here, it put the date, the time, and whatever I wrote in on Y.
Can you go to the top and show where you're telling log test to write it to?
Okay, so somewhere before you start, right at the beginning of your programming for that situation, so at once is usually where I put this, and you would specify the log file name by setting. Now, if you have log file in your environment variable list or in the config table, it'll use that as a default. But if you want a different one for different things, you assign it here. You can set these variables in the config file or, in your bat file or however you want. You know how variables
You're
work.
putting it in the environment up there because you don't have it in the config table?
Or I want this instead of that.
Okay.
This is an override. filePro treats its environment variables very sanely, I think. The closer you are to the programming, that variable takes precedence. So if I set something right in processing, it overrides what happened before. If it was set in the menu line, then that would override what's in the config. It kind of, config is the basic default, and then as you go closer into what you're actually doing, if you set and change things in the environment, whatever's last is what happens. That's the same with printers, which can drive you totally bonkers. But I made two possibilities if it's DOS or if it's not DOS. If your programming is such that you all stay on DOS, you don't have to worry about the Unix side. If it's programming you're going to flip back and forth, throw them both in there, what the heck. So that's all you have to do, isn't that simple? Okay, so that's log file. Now, Richard mentioned about audit trails. And let me tell you a trick, and I don't have an example of it, but I will explain it, and I think you'll follow me. If you are in filePro and you want to track a record and changes to a record, let me tell you how I've seen it done, and this works, and you can use it, the same file, for changes to all kinds of files and go an audit trail. So you set up a database with a username, a date, a time, and then a huge big field, big enough to hold the record size of the biggest file you need to store like that. Okay? So when you approach a record, so when you're hit in that @update logic that we have, you set an array that has element, and the size of it is defined to be the length of the file. So if I'm in a file that has 250 characters per record, then I make an array. It has one element, and so you say 1 parenthesis, and then you put another parenthesis and say 250 parenthesis. So now I have an array that is going to hold the entire file, one record. Okay? So I have that in an array, and I've just gone into update mode, so I know what the record was before you touched it. Right? So now you update, you do whatever you're going to do, you save the file. Now I take another array and I map it to the record that's there when I'm done. At the end of updating, I compare the two. The one before, the one after. If they match, cool. You didn't touch anything. You didn't change anything. If they don't match, I take the one that was before and I write it out to this database, and I just stuff that whole array into that big field and add your name, the date, the time, and what changed. And then I'm sorry, I forgot one field. One field more you need is the file it came from. So you can use this same database for a number of different files. You don't have to set up a special one every time. And you have programming that you can paste in. All you'd have to change is the size of the record in the dimension statement. This has worked very effectively. You can pull that record back in if you want to pull it back, because you can just paste that array right over the real fields and it will update put the record back like it was. Now what you lose here, and there's a little bit, people will complain about the overhead, the change dates, the information at the top of filePro, but you can adjust for that if you really had to. There's ways to do it, but I always keep that data in real fields so that I can move records around without a problem, but some people don't.
Nancy, one of my clients had me create a qualifier, and when specific people went in to update a record, it broke the original record out so that if any data was changed in the current record, he had a trail of who did it, because I had added some fields.
That will also work, but what you don't have then, since a qualifier has exactly the same fields as the main file, you don't have the capability to add the who did it, you don't have all the extra fields that you can add on if you wanted to.
They were in the original field.
If they're part of your live field data, that worked great, because you don't have to add that to the data after the fact. But if you don't keep that and it's just in the filePro overhead, then that you would lose that information, which usually is what you actually want, is that part of it. So it can come in handy. You can go back and ask the user, why did you change this customer's address? What were you doing? Why did this money that came into my business disappear? Why didn't we do embezzling issues? I've run across these, so this kind of data is helpful if you're managing money.
I use kind of a combination of the two. I'll create the file that you have, but I'll only have old value, new value, besides the file name, the date, who did it, the time that they did it, because like in a customer file, one of the fields might be takes insurance. And they'll come to me and they're like, how come on these invoices it didn't charge insurance? I go back into that array, and when I look up the records for that customer file, I'll see that on this date somebody changed it from yes to no, and then the same date they might have changed it to yes again, or 3 days later they change it, so I have like a timestamp. So I create the qualifier, copy my original. When it's saved, I go through a loop. You can always go to 999, because if the record's not there, you don't have a problem with the loop going through the files as an array. And if any values have changed, then I create a record in my log file of the date, the time, who did it, what file it was in, my customer reference that I know who it is, old value, new value. So now I'm keeping only the fields that are changed in my log file instead of a whole record. And then I delete the qualifier record, because I don't need that anymore.
that we, I've looked at that, and that just is a lot more overhead, I always thought, because you're trying to figure out what field got changed instead of just grabbing the whole record. If you have storage issues, then the whole record is not a good idea, but most people don't have storage issues anymore. So I don't know.
I'm just
if-
looking at the specific data,
Yeah.
like the one file, the one field out of the 600 that was changed, or the 3 fields out of the 600 that were changed. I don't want to.
Yeah, I've done it that way. I've just set up another database a lot of times that just not qualified, but another database where I could add fields to the file and only the stuff that got changed gets put over there.
Yeah,
So it's a little smaller, but there's a lot of ways to accomplish this, and I'm just kind of giving you some ideas that you can pick from as they work for you. Okay. Anything else we want to look at? I got all kind of stuff here. One of the things might be, we have 2 things in filePro, and one of them is qualifiers. And I know a lot of people here may or may not use them for specific things. How many people here know what qualifiers are? How many have no clue? I see a few no clues. Okay.
Actually, another quick note I'll make on qualifiers, I have one that's called deleted, so when they delete records, I dump them in the delete qualifier and they come out of the main file, but they don't really come off my system, so I always have all my data sitting somewhere. I can go back to it.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to just mention qualifiers. I don't have a good example here. I've got a qualifier menu, but I don't remember what's on there. So let me just talk about this. This is how I always explain qualifiers to people. You're writing an application, and you're writing everything on the first floor of your building. Everything in this room relates to this room, relates to that room. All your files are here. A qualifier lets you add a second floor to that. And that second floor can be doing exactly the same as the first floor, but these 2 floors don't interact. So if you put them on the second floor, all the lookups that you did between the rooms and then went through file, all of them still work, but they're on the second floor, so they don't match to the first floor. 2 companies running exactly the same programming, the data is not connected. But filePro gives you the option to connect them by using the qualifier name at the end of your lookup name. So if you're doing lookup customer @ second floor, whatever you name your qualifier, I don't care. It's going to look for that customer on the second floor no matter which floor you're on. So you can have a code table, let's say, that you share between all the floors. You can have as many floors as you want. You can have a zip code file you share with all the floors. They all look in the same file, less data to enter, they share. So you can use a qualifier for archiving. We have in one of my applications, periodically we have to make the working production data smaller because it's huge. So we archive things by year. So I can look back and I have 17, 16, 15, 14. So we archive everything that goes with this record, all the little subfiles that match to it, go back, go in a qualifier based on whatever criteria you deem is appropriate for that year break. So that when it gets to the time and you say, well, I don't care about 2012 anymore, you just clear off all the 2012 qualifiers and you've got them gone. All that data is gone. So it's a matter of controlling the data a little bit and how much it uses. Now, filePro is fast, but when you're getting up to big databases, it takes more time. And if you don't need things that are 2 years old, why keep them in the mix? But you don't want to get rid of them, so you just throw them into a qualifier. So you can set up qualifiers that way. And what I keep is a database where I say what qualifiers are active. So when I go to search for something, if one of the workers say, I need to find this particular order, and it's not in the current year, I know which qualifiers to go look at. And I just look in the database, I say, okay, I have 17, look at 17, I have 16, look at 16, and it goes back until it finds it starting with most current and working back. So I don't have to try to figure out if the files exist, I know what qualifiers I have already. So you've got a few things that you can work with qualifiers. So qualifiers can do a lot of stuff. Like, I run into,
Quick tip, if you're using qualifiers on Unix and you have a common file that they all use, like zip code or codes, you can link those qualifiers, the key and all the keys together and all the indexes, so you don't have to look up to the qualifier.
Actually, I'll add one to that. You don't have to do that because you can always do a lookup at and it goes to the
Yeah,
base
but it might be
qualifier.
easier,
That's-
it's easier to link it and not have to do all that.
that only works on Unix.
Yeah.
Say that again?
He said, and Unix has the capability of linking files. So in effect, you have multiple names for the same file.
At the operating system level.
Yeah,
the link-
at the operating system level.
Not
But
just
you can't do that on Windows, so if that design is ever moved.
I mean,
You don't use that for something like common code, you know, like
Zip
everybody
code
uses the
file,
same
perfect,
code.
that you said, like you have a zip code file, no
Yeah.
matter what qualifier you're in, you wanna be able to do a zip code lookup to get the city and the state. So you can be in a qualifier, as long as in your lookup for the zip code file only, you have the file name at, you're going to your base one file every time, because the zip
Right.
codes aren't changing. So why even complicate?
Well, because you don't have to do the.
You don't have to put the
programming.
at
You look
there.
up to this codes file thousands of times, and you don't have to put the at, but it's the same file across all qualifiers.
It's a solution.
Yeah, that's two different ways to do it. The problem with the link files I found is then you can't make any changes to your database unless you get rid of all the linked files, and then you can restructure it if you need it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does cause problems when you have to run
I ran across that.
defined. And it can actually screw you up because it will make those changes on every qualifier, which may break the whole
That's
file.
right, when you structure files.
Yeah, and it's worth it because if you put things in a qualifier, it's not hard to run through your database, look for lookups, and add an @ sign on the end of them, you know, to make sure, to check and see if this is one that stays on the same floor you're on, or if this is one that crosses floors, and put those right qualifiers. And file names in filePro and lookups can be strings. They can be data, so you don't have to hard code. You just put them in quotes, give it a variable, you know, concatenate them, put some you know how the logic goes, the syntax.
And when you're in a qualifier, if you have the variable set, your lookup doesn't change. Like you don't have to specify the qualifier. It's only if you want to go between qualifiers, you need that at and the
Right.
qualifier.
Right. So, I mean, this can be very valuable in a lot of places because you can set pfqual in somebody's batch file, and then they're on floor 2 no matter what they do. No questions have to be asked. Or you can have a command line menu ask what qualifier you want. And filePro has 3, it has a hard-coded option where you can hard-code the qualifier on a command line. It has the ask me where it shows you the qualifiers the way they are in the data. And it has a prompt you with this prompt. So you can say, what year do you want? And you put that right on the command line. So instead of that funky little qualifier screen that comes up, it'll be a little more friendly. So you have those different ways to do it. Yes, sir.
What's your limitation on your qualifiers?
Hard to space.
I think it's hard drive space. I don't think there is one. I think it gives
The
you,
main.
We use about 50.
what, pardon me?
We use about 50.
Yeah, I've used an awful lot of them. I've never hit a boundary.
But it's something 8 characters long though, or something like
You,
that.
yeah, it's an
7?
8-character qualifier name. And you know when you go into define files, you put them in there, those are just to,
Create
that
your
list
base file.
that you get in define files is just, it checks to see if you have all those when you save define files and makes them if you don't. If they're not there after, because I use programming and I create qualifiers on the fly from programming, and I don't go put them in that list, and they work fine. So they don't have to be in there to work. That's just for you to, that's a tool to help you add them. Once they're added, that list doesn't matter anymore.
And also, if you use the list, I believe it copies all the indexes from the base to those lists also, so you don't have to copy or create. the
Yeah, that can
indexes
be
for
a
the
blessing
qualifiers.
or a curse.
Yes.
Yeah, so what he said was, if you use the define files to add a qualifier, it's going to take your key file from your main file. It's going to say, okay, you want a new qualifier. We want that, a new key, a new data, but we want all the same index sorts in the new file. So it's going to, if you have 20 indexes, automatic indexes, it's going to set you up with 20 automatic indexes, all built the way you have them in the original.
But you can change them if you want.
Yeah, oh yeah, you can go delete them and do whatever you want. So I usually make them, so I have processing that will make
Copy 'em.
qualifiers, and then it puts the indexes I want there, and not all the extra ones you might use in normal data entry, but just ones to find things that programming needs, because usually that's not a data entry level for a lot of things that I use it for. It's just a reference point.
A quick note, if you're copying the indexes, make sure you rebuild them for the qualifier.
Well, it doesn't copy them, it just sets up the sort.
No,
They'll
no,
be
like if
empty.
you're doing it on the fly, like you said, you create your key,
Oh, I
as I
just, yeah.
said.
You know, I showed you before how you make a command line to do an index
Yeah.
and set it up. You just do it that way. You just execute that.
With the qualifier extension, so it's doing it for that qualifier.
Yeah. Easy enough. So, where do we go now?
Nancy, show them a map, because one of the things that most filePro programmers don't realize is that once you've created a map, you can use the physical name within the map rather than the field number. Except if you have something like first name, you've got to put an underscore, first underscore name
Yeah, it's,
to use that. And
Okay.
it can come very handy. It's like having a long variable.
it can be a curse and it can be a help. So, one of the things, and I hope as they build more stuff into filePro, somebody goes back, and maybe this is part of a feature I don't know yet, because I'm not real up with 6.0 yet and all the new features. But be careful when you put headings in your database, and this has been a feature for a long time, a lot of people just didn't know. The headings you put up to the first space actually identify data. So before we had long variable names, if I had a field heading that said last name with one word, no space, and I put in my programming last name equals 5 or equals quote George quote whatever, it would change that field as if I said field 5 equals and overwrite the data. However, now that we have long variable names, it's hard to, and arrays and all this stuff. Be careful about the names you use and that they don't conflict with other things. I just had to go back with a program that was old. And I went and I tried to add a syntax for a character string, to add a backslash somehow, you know, to put in syntax. Character string, quote, 92, quote, parent. Okay. It wouldn't work. It kept giving me a syntax error, and I'm going, what the heck, what the heck? I'm looking all over. I know I did this right. I'm not an idiot. And so I looked at it and looked at it. Finally, I said, I'm looking through this table. So I searched for CHR. Sure enough, that old code had a lookup that was alias to CHR. So CHR equals some file name. It could have been a label. These kind of things. So be careful how you name things when you're doing them. So make a plan. When you put them in your map, do them a certain way. When you're using them as variables, maybe put a letter in front, add something, do something, so it's, you know you won't have conflicts. Because filePro doesn't always tell you there is a conflict. You have to figure those syntax errors out, and it can be a real headache. But that's one thing you should always look for if you're having trouble with some syntax and you have no clue why it's giving you an error. Look for other things. Look for the map you're in. Make sure you didn't use that name, that long variable name, or that label, or that lookup alias, or that array name that you're having trouble with. Make sure you didn't use it someplace else for a name.
So names, if you had a field named, field 1 is last name, and you said declare last name in the processing.
And it's spelled the same? Yeah, it would be confusing. You don't know what filePro's going to do.
So you don't know what would happen, like.
You would probably get your field trashed in filePro's map, you know, the database. I don't know what would take precedence. So be careful you don't do it, because you never know what could happen. And then you're going to say, how did I change that data? But I wanted it to be in a dummy variable, and I put it in real data. Maybe we could ask Logan, maybe he would know. You don't know either, do you?
I think the variable should take precedence, but I haven't tested that. Just the same way I haven't tested, like if you were to alias a field. So if I did like my field : 1, I haven't tested that either. I don't know which one takes precedence.
It's better if you don't do it in the first place because it's confusing. I mean, you want your programming. If you were trained programmer back in school, they would give you rules for this. Because those programmers, when they took fast Fortran and COBOL and all those languages, there were rules because there were not solo programmers writing code. There were committees of programmers. And they had to be able to read each other's code. So there was rules as to how you name variables, how you name labels, how you name things, so that it would work so each person would do the same thing. We don't do that because we weren't trained. At least most of us weren't. And so we don't know those rules. So make rules for yourself. Make sure you call them something that you know is a variable. I see people when they do arrays will use square brackets instead of parentheses. And then they know that's an array and not a different kind of a thing, a lookup. So you can just give yourself a plan and try to follow it. And that's going to help you so much in the long run because you will have a better control of your programming and you will be hunting for less syntax errors. Because those they may not even throw an error. They just may do something you don't want it to do. And I have found some odd situations with some of this stuff. Yes, sir.
I'm a developer who goes in and often picks up when a programmer has left a company or died. I've had companies, one lady, she had a stroke, she died in her chair. She had all the passwords in her head and all that sort of thing. It was a terrible mess done to the code. And getting back to your linked file thing, if you're going to do something like a linked file, you better have it documented in all your programs and every place else you can think of that I linked this file together, because the linked file thing caused me a lot of grief one time when I didn't realize a file was linked. So please, the younger people can ignore this, but a lot of us are getting older, and you could have a stroke, whatever, I'm saying strokes where people can't remember their password because they had a stroke, and that sort of thing. Please make sure everything is well documented in your code, because somebody's going to have to go behind you and pick up this mess someday, and they're going to have a terrible time figuring all this out.
Well, and it doesn't hurt to put comments in that lovely new thing for seeing the comment when you're looking at the labels in that little thing.
Great.
That is fabulous. Put those comments in there. I try to do that just so for my own sanity. But put it in there, or if you did something weird, you've got some calculation and you did all this, put a little explanation. Okay, this is supposed to do this, so that when you look at it in 10 years, I have code that is 40 years old. I don't remember what I was thinking back then.
What was this?
It is so bad, and you go look, and they're still using it, so don't think I don't have to go back and look at it sometimes.
Did I hear yesterday that you can use a long variable name in the lookup now instead of just the dummy? Now can you use a field name or a description then too instead of a number 1 or in a?
I don't think so.
You can't combine them in parentheses, so you can go field 1 and field 3 and field 5, and now you have like the string it's looking
Well,
at.
right, but the field names being confused with long variable names, I was just wondering if.
Well, you have to define them different. So, make a rule. Say F underscore. See, when I set up a file name variable, I'll use F underscore and say what the name of the file is. So when I see that variable, I know I mean that to be a file. And you might do L for some other, maybe you have a better code or a way you do it. But maybe put something underscore and then the variable, and then it's a long variable and not a field in the file that you're getting mixed up with things.
The other thing that I've done for one of my clients, because we've got so much code written, I've got a versioning software that says we use this index, and it's used on these lookups, and it's being used for this reason. I put some comments in. I have it in a file. We also have it for dummy variables and declare values. It was just getting too confusing and not knowing what or why. And he asked me, can we delete certain indexes? And I went through and said, no. I looked, it was the code, it ran through all my code, and there's a lot of it, 15 years of development, so that I now know, and we can go in and look and see specifically what an index is used for, what files that may be accessing this, because you'll have lookups that will, from one file to another, having master files. So you want to know whether a report or an input process is hitting that index, where it's being used, and how it's being used. And after a while, you forget.
Well, you can make an index invisible in the runtime mode. There is a question for that when you're saving
Yeah,
indexes.
but I'm not looking to make it, they just want to know whether or not, they're using all 26 automatic indexes and 10 demand indexes. They want to know,
Right.
can we delete one of these because they've got a lot of...
Some of them are obvious. I know when you clean up indexes, you can tell, but you need to that's why those menu options are good. If you set a menu up with the indexes you want to stay there the way you put them, because you need them in coding, then that should be important that they don't get changed. Because a small change to an index sort can affect your programming dramatically.
Especially your outputs.